This is Ukrainian television network Contact. Today, joining me from Belfast is an editor of the literary journal Irish Pages, Chris Agee. Hello, Chris. How you doing?
Hi, Juliana. Delighted to be here.
Uh, Likewise. Chris, it was quite difficult to set up an interview with you. We had to change a couple times the dates, the time. I know you're very busy. What's the typical day of the editor as a Irish Pages looks like?
It can be very busy. It can be, to use the kind of slightly negative word in English, it can be a shit show. There's so much going on. There's so many pressures. The big pressures are always deadlines, which are non-negotiable. Like this, we're going to talk about war in Europe issue with Ukraine. So generally we have distribution, they're expecting it. There's always stuff with the journal and there's always stuff with the books. So we're a press, the Irish Pages Press, and we do a lot of books, about 5 or 6 books a year, and we do 2 issues of the journal. So it's really very hectic. There's like pedestrian, practical stuff, and then there's, editing, and then there's the fun stuff like launches and meetings and lunches and fun stuff. People coming back, pie in the office. So it's a mixed bag, as they say in Scotland. A lucky bag, which is a bag of sweets with all different kinds.
Thank you for your answer. So we know a little bit about Irish Pages. How long does it exist in print?
Irish Pages started in 2002, the journal, 2002 and 2003. The formal journal is Irish Pages, a journal of contemporary writing. And we've been doing a couple of issues a year. We're taking along. We're widely considered the leading journal in Ireland. We're often compared with a big journal in London called Granta. We're kind of the Irish version of Granta. And we try to combine excellence with accessibility. We want the journal to be popular and read, but not populist. And this war in Ukraine is a classic of that. It's probably, putting aside the books, the one we've just done on genocide in Gaza, this is probably the most important issue that we've done because of the war.
The latest issue of Irish Pages is titled War in Europe. So what's the significance of this title, and how do you feel War in Europe? It sounds pretty scary.
War in Europe, I think I might have mentioned before, is one of the 2 best issues we've ever done. One was about the Nobel laureate Seamus Heaney, the poet, just after he died. It was a memorial issue, just called Heaney. He was the most popular and the greatest Irish person, widely considered. Everybody thought it. And he died in 2013, so we brought out a special issue. But equally important, in fact, more important, is War in Europe, because if Heaney is just one supremely talented individual, this is a supremely important issue. The war in Ukraine is decisive. If Ukraine loses, it's really, really a disaster. And maybe we feel that more in Ireland because of the violent history of the foundation of the state in 1922, that's the Republic, and the continuing partition. So we're right now in the United Kingdom. They didn't let us go in 1922. So we know what partition means. We know that lots of people had to leave. We know that the people who are here engaged in terrorist activities. Some people would call them partisan activities. So we understand the whole dynamic of partition. And I can see what's going to happen if those territories in the East are taken over. It will be an endless, simmering, partisan terrorist conflict. And partitions are always disaster. So as Askold, back to Askold in a moment, Melnyczuk, who is the guest editor, we felt we were incapable of doing this unless we had a person who knew Ukraine, knew the language. As Askold said in one of the opening essays, war stays for dinner. Like a guest that you don't want, it's like, go away, take your borscht and go away. So war stays for dinner. And I think at his introduction to this whole essay or issue, he says, Ireland is the natural ally of all anti-colonial struggles. So it's very pro-Ukrainian and it's super pro-Palestinian. And they, the Israeli embassy ambassadors left and said, well, Ireland is horrible and anti-Semitic, but we're just supporting the right of people to defend themselves. So when this is all starting, we came up with actually the war in Ukraine idea about the time that Gaza started. So for 3 great months, I was writer in residence in UMass, University of Massachusetts. And there was Askold, professor, the first Ukrainian descended person, but he's very Ukrainian, bilingual. And I got to be good friends. So I'm watching the Ukrainian war and said, okay, let's do something. War in Europe came to me right away. Askold came to me right away. I emailed Askold and he said instantly, yes. And then Askold assembled the 18 great Ukrainian writers here. Now, some of them already had translators, other had to be translated. He got together 18 or 20 really notable people. And then we started to compile some Irish writers, some of whom touch on the question of violence. Others are Irish writers who actually went to Ukraine. And one important essay is called Ukraine, a Love Story, about a significantly good Irish writer, Irish American, whose wife is Ukrainian. So he tells the whole story through his marriage. Like when they went, it would have been, it's a good while. They would have married like in the late 90s. They saw Maidan, they saw all this kind of stuff. And he also provides a portfolio of photographs, like the one on the back. Great. Size. Carpathians, right? After the communism. So there's a whole portfolio, really good, of images of Ukraine. So that's how it came about. And Askold says it's one of the best things, most important things, best artistic project that he's ever done. And he does, if you ask anybody in America, everybody knows who are serious writers. They've at least heard of him. So that's how it came about. It was very demanding. You can imagine 18 translators. People like Yaroslava Strika, who teaches in the States. She has a nice piece called, the subtitle is War in Translation, which is really interesting about how she wonders whether she's going to even finish the translation before the library is blown up. And what was so interesting about her, Yaroslava Strika, she did her own translation in absolutely perfect English, which we know by being involved with Croatian translation, it's very, very difficult to translate your own word perfectly. So her essay is called, really good, called If Translation Falls in an Empty Library, Does It Make a Sound? That's wonderful, sophisticated, accessible. So there's people like Serhii Zadin, your great poet, if I'm pronouncing it right. Serhii Plakhy, who's a scholar at Harvard. He has the think piece. The think piece is called The Fall of the Pan-Russian Utopia. That's what he calls this whole Putin idea, the Pan-Russian Utopia, but it goes way back, of course, in Tsarist times. He has a mastery of sources. It's quite a long essay, so it's a think piece. Yeah. And we felt that this was important. I mean, by we, I meant Askold and I, that someone gives to the picture right at the beginning. And then all these other things are occurring within it. So, I mean, that's why I say it's our best issue with the exception of the Heaney issue. So we did him justice, the local genius, right? Poet. He wrote essays, but he didn't get involved too much in politics because the politics here is internecine. It's a genuine civil war. It was. Or I never used the word war. We got two factions, ethno-national factions. One wants to be Brit and one doesn't. But they're both, to be honest, often doing atrocities. Whereas the population becomes jaded and going, the IRA says it didn't accidentally shot that little kid. Right. And the loyalists, the pro-British crowd say, We shot a couple taxi drivers because we thought he was in the IRA, And everybody's going, this doesn't work. This isn't like Ukraine, where there was a clear aggressor. This is something inside the country with the British Army then getting involved. But the basic idea is you had an arbiter nation, the British, who actually got us a peace settlement in the end. No one could believe it, 1998, the Belfast Agreement. But it's very different, obviously, from a major European war. But the dynamics of violence are not different. Lose your daughter, you lose your wife, a bomb, fish and chip, happens to be an IRA bomb, but there were plenty of loyalist bombs. It kills 9 people, half of them, kids. Or there was the Omar bomb with 31 people, and I think almost every, women who are pregnant. Or there was Bloody Sunday in 1972, I believe, when the Brits just opened up before they had learned how to behave, let's put it that way. They opened up and they killed what they call a baker's dozen here, that's 13 people. But when you count, all but 2 or 3 were children under 18. So after a while, 30 years of this, the population became distrustful of everybody in almost an Eastern European way. They say one thing, we just believe the opposite, like in the Soviet Union. They say that they're after peace. The IRA always said it only shot crown forces, which means the army and the police and the prison officers. And then we'll go, what do you mean? They just shot some civilian. So the whole thing was very different. I don't want to make any parallels, but the experience of violence for 30 years. There were, how much, Jake? 3,400, or was it 2,400? A lot of people were killed on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there was the War of Independence in 1922, and then they fought a clear war against a British Empire that wanted to keep Ireland in. It was actually the first European country to turn against an imperial power in 1916. Later, they all did it in 17. I mean, before the Bolsheviks. In 17, there was the Ottomans, and they all happened in the aftermath of World War I. But stop and think what the Irish did. They attacked the British in the middle of World War I. Because after 100 and whatever it was, 20 years of feeling like they were very close to Ukrainian feelings now. Why do you insist on ruling us when a large number of people don't want to be ruled? So there was the War of Independence, and then, of course, Michael Collins agreed to partition with the British. But one faction of the Republicans, the Irish Republicans, didn't agree with partition. So they had a civil war. And Yeats's poems deal with the great, blood on the road. There's a big experience, and this experience of anti-colonial approach and the hostility right across the political spectrum to what I call great power thinking, exactly what Trump and Putin are doing now, but characteristic of France and Britain in all sorts of situations, colonial situations, including Bosnia. They treated Bosnia like an afterthought, the people like an afterthought, and only intervened when it really got bad. So there is a huge sympathy. I've elaborated because it wouldn't be necessarily so clear to Ukrainian people, and it certainly wasn't so clear to Irish people until this whole bloodbath started.
Yes, and as we are recording this interview with you, Ukraine is commemorating the 3rd anniversary of this unprovoked Russian attack. Truly hard times for Ukraine. And at the same time, Ukrainian culture is flourishing, especially publishing business is booming. And there are translated works of Ukrainian authors are becoming more and more popular in the West. How do you explain that?
I imagine that there's a lot of Canadian Ukrainians, as I mentioned to you before. I know Canada quite well. They may be very familiar with Ukraine because of ancestry, but maybe a lot of Canadians are not so aware, and especially a lot of Americans aren't. But generally speaking, there's a problem. The West does not know Eastern Europe or the Balkans. They don't know what it is. They don't understand it. And more specifically, I mentioned my son is a Slavonic translator from Croatia. They don't understand anything about the Slavonic world. The Slavic world and the English-speaking world are rather distant. Bosnian Croatian is rather different, where it's French and German and all of it's very close, Western Europe. So you just have to take it from me. I know the East pretty well. Take it from me, most Westerners don't understand what is happening until Ukraine came. And then it's pretty clear that a huge power, Tsarist echoes, more than echoes, has just attacked a free, sovereign country. And in Ireland, at least, that just pushed the wrong buttons. So there's about 200,000 Ukrainians, I believe, or maybe certainly more than 100,000. And a couple of them, journalists, are writing in this issue about coming to Ireland. So if you go out to the West, in a particular place I know quite well, they took over the hostel, the youth hostel. The Ukrainians are all there. And they were very welcoming, still are, until this whole far-right thing started right across Europe. Now there's some hostility to immigrants or refugees or asylum seekers, but not so much Ukrainians.
Interesting. Do you think with the President Trump's changes in US politics, international politics, there will be changes in Europe, and in what way?
I think it's over. I think the Euro-American thing is essentially over. They'll try to stitch together. They stitch together in NATO, but this whole thing of C.D. Vance showing up and insulting the entire military and political class with just fantasies that are cooked up in the States, fragments. As Zelensky said, they're in a disinformation bubble. And it's not just Trump. It's a large proportion of Americans who just don't know anything about the rest of the world. But to come back to your question, I couldn't tell you exactly why suddenly various Ukrainian authors have now a lot more celebrity in the States, but it's almost certainly because it started with the first invasion and people became aware that something really serious is happening out there. And now this invasion, who's the author again of The Penguin?
Oh, Kurkov. Okay.
He wrote the book, The Penguin. Now that's very well known. He's very well known. But I noticed it during Bosnia, that the West suddenly realized that there's something happening. Bosnia, genocide, 200,000 people killed. Suddenly it realizes that there's something in this country called Bosnia-Herzegovina, which they hadn't even heard of, because in the West, it was just Yugoslavia. They didn't understand it had republics, right? Like the Soviet Union. No one knew that. It's just the Soviet Union. I mean, most people didn't. Yugoslavia, 5 republics and 1 autonomous province, and suddenly Bosnia happens. And I noticed with big, high literary events or publications like the New Yorker, they had to find the Bosnian writers. This was like a pressure. So we have all these writers who, some of whom are, extremely well known, but other ones would be respected but not well known, certainly outside of the West, like Ostap Slivin or Yulia Musakovska. But then we have at the same time, very distinguished scholars like Baudelaire, Vladimir Yermolenko and his wife Tatiana Ogarkova, sorry about the pronunciation, or people like
Юрко Прохасько, Юрій Андрухович, you have Oksana Zabushko, you have a human rights lawyer, Alexandra Matvichuk. This is a great selection, and I want to thank you for giving the voice to Ukraine and engaging with Ukrainians, like community, global community. Definitely thank you to Irish people for supporting us. Before we say goodbye, I remember that you wanted to read some poems to us, which you wrote.
And I will end with the two poems because they perhaps suggest that despite what I've said about the Anglophone world, especially the Anglophone world does not have much sense of the Eastern Slavonic world or the Balkans. More in, Czechia, Central Europe, there's more awareness. Slavonic world. And I think this is one of the big things in Europe now because Slavonic world in NATO is really understands what Putin's about, One was written literally as the takeover of Crimea was happening. So I always date my poems. This is a poem about traveling by plane from Belfast, which is very close to Scotland, to Glasgow. And it was dated, placed and dated Belfast, Glasgow, 22-25 February 2014. So that Saturday night, this poem was written over a couple of days. And it does bear on this whole thing I'm saying about the West. Because you mentioned, I have a pun on EasyJet. And there's your image towards the end that talks about an easy passenger. Well, that's the West. You're not having easy. There are no easy passengers in Ukraine now. But the West, it's all, it's all good. We're prosperous. Something bad is happening. So this is at the heart of this perception in 2014. Yellow cat's cradles of the old gantries in the dawn's sulphury blue, a twinkling EasyJet preparing to land behind a row of poplars, silhouetted as if a besom broom blown out of the east from the Ukrainian drama where history has hardly ended. And Davos, be aware and be apprised with your Faustus of capital, running amok and wrecking its havoc. The mass ethicalized here too may yet arise like a Luther or Brecht to defenestrate banksters and oligarchs in a collective catharsis, to roll the tumbril for your shameless self-indulgences. Says at least this easy passenger. Putin is a fly feeding on death and carrion, like those, say, alighting on the high-rise apartments or high-hanging garnet grenades or pomegranates split open, their once rosy-fingered flesh now spilling their seed into blackened rot and waste, not far from the terrace's classic onlooker. Or those others, no golden horde, buzzing around the fermenting or even raisined dead grape clusters in a last frenzy of life overhead. To no great purpose, they will be laid waste and to rest within a week or a month. For them now, there will be no winter campaign.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, for your conversation and for finding time to talk to us. This has been a conversation with Chris Agee, editor of Irish Pages, and especially about their latest issue, War in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you. Delighted.